At 6, he's back. America re-elects Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States. He says America has given him an unprecedented and powerful mandate, with his Republican Party also retaking control of the Senate.
This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have. This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.
CBS News projects that Donald Trump will be the winner of the state of Pennsylvania. That is a state.
This, one of the key swing states that helped secure victory on a night of high drama. No sign of Kamala Harris since yesterday's drubbing, her shocked supporters leaving a planned Democrat victory party as the results emerged.
Here in West Palm Beach, Donald Trump is preparing for his second term in the White House with that resounding mandate behind him.
Well, throughout the program, we'll have reaction and analysis from across America and around the world. What does a Donald Trump presidency mean for us all?
On BBC London, facing the bailiffs over unpaid DART charges. A BBC London investigation into the drivers fighting thousands of pounds in fines they say were issued in error.
A very good evening to you from Washington, where Donald Trump has comfortably won the race to become this country's 47th president, in what's been described as one of the most dramatic turnarounds in political history. We'll be looking at his fortunes over the last few years, how he's managed to become the 47th president and eke out a victory that many people believed would be too close to call. In fact, he won very handily indeed. Many, in fact, thought there'd be legal wrangling, that we wouldn't know the result for some time. None of that actually managed to come to pass. Not only did Mr. Trump sweep home in the crucial swing states he needed to win, but he also won the popular vote, describing his victory as magnificent. His Democratic opponent, Kamala Harris, was swept aside and has yet to say anything publicly about her defeat. This was what the electoral map of the U.S. looks like today. The blue shows Democrat states and red Republican. The magic number in the Electoral College system that the candidates had to reach to claim victory was 270. And as you can see, Donald Trump has already crossed the line, even though some states still haven't declared. In terms of the popular vote, Donald Trump currently stands at 51%, with Kamala Harris at 47%. As I say, tonight we'll be assessing how he's managed to turn around his political fortunes from convicted felon to becoming once again the most powerful man in the world. We'll also be looking at what went wrong for Kamala Harris's campaign and what Donald Trump's victory means for the rest of the world. But first, let's join Gary O'Donoghue, who was at Donald Trump's campaign headquarters last night as the results came in and who's now in West Palm Beach, Florida. Gary.
Clive, America wakes up to a new reality today. Come January the 20th, Donald Trump will be back in the White House for a second time. He's promising a mass deportation of migrants, huge tariffs on foreign goods, and ending the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. But that is for next year. For the moment, half of America is celebrating what was an extraordinary night.
As the results rolled in, they began to believe, bit by bit, that they could win.
What do you think?
I think it was freaking awesome! Woo!
When the key swing state of Pennsylvania was called for the former president, they could barely contain themselves.
We did it, man! I'm not just happy, I am ecstatic. We are so back! We're so back! This country's saved!
This is an extraordinary political comeback. The former president and now future president has overcome scandal, court cases, even a brush with death from an assassin's bullet. And the country has sent him back to Washington and the White House for another 4 years. He's promising a new golden age for America.
The party atmosphere grew and grew as the alcohol flowed.
Please welcome President-elect Donald J. Trump.
But it wasn't until after 2 a.m. that they got the chance to see their next president in the flesh, flanked by his whole family and his key lieutenants.
I will not let you down. America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, richer, safer, and stronger than it has ever been before. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tonight has become a very different night to the one we expected. Donald Trump, victorious, without dispute.
The result came quicker than anyone or the polls had expected. It was a very different picture at Kamala Harris's HQ in Washington.
So you won't hear from the vice president tonight?
As the reality sank in, the party atmosphere evaporated. Donald Trump won this campaign by hugely improving his support among Hispanic voters and a significant rise among black voters too, especially men in both communities. While the vice president failed to match Joe Biden's support among women in 2020 and was held responsible by voters for years of rising prices in the shops and the highest levels of illegal migration at the southern border in decades. Donald Trump celebrated his victory with some of his key supporters, such as the world's richest man, Elon Musk. The scale of this victory was underlined by the man who will be Donald Trump's vice president.
I thank you for the trust that you placed in me. And I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
Despite what the polls had indicated, this was no narrow victory. Donald Trump goes back to the White House for a second time, having won big. Gary O'Donoghue, BBC News, Florida.
Well, it's 4 years since Donald Trump left the White House, with many suggesting his political career was over. Just a few months ago, he was convicted of business fraud over payments to the adult film star Stormy Daniels, and he's still facing several other possible prosecutions. But despite all of that, Donald Trump is now set to be sworn in as America's next president on Inauguration Day, January the 20th, next year. So, how did he manage to turn around his political fortunes and rise once again to the highest office in the land? Here's Sarah Smith.
From the mutinous glare in this infamous mugshot, an iconic image of defiance, to the bold, clenched fist thrust in the air, showing that nothing can hold him back, it was all leading to this, the most dramatic comeback in American political history. 4 years ago, refusing to accept defeat, he summoned his supporters to Washington and sent them to the Capitol.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Who's out?
The January the 6th riot destroyed Donald Trump's reputation. It could have exiled him to permanent ignominy. Appearing in court charged with a felony crime might then have killed his political career. But it resurrected it instead. His supporters believed he was being victimized by the Biden administration.
They're not after me, they're after you. I just happen to be standing in their way, and I always will stand in their way.
The breaking news, Donald Trump guilty.
A watershed moment in this nation's
His conviction only further cemented his support. He's now the first criminal felon to be elected president.
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
One simple question got right to the heart of the matter for all the people who felt much better off when he was in charge.
No matter how you spin it, you know, like some of us are working 2 to 3 jobs and not getting a lot of that family time because, you know, we have to put food on the table.
On immigration, he captured, as well as stoked, fears over the record levels of illegal immigrants streaming into America. In one sentence, he demolished Joe Biden's candidacy.
On the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
and defied death when he could so easily have been killed at a campaign rally, but came up fighting, driven by raw political instinct. He was then worshipped by supporters who saw divine intervention at work.
To elect Donald J. Trump.
He looked utterly unstoppable, but not unflappable.
People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
Calculated jibes from his new opponent knocked him off script.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
But voters seem uniquely willing to forgive outrageous statements when they come from Donald J. Trump.
Does Donald Trump say some crazy stuff? Absolutely. Absolutely.
And does that bother you?
Well, it does, but it doesn't.
I don't know if it would be the more outrageous things he says, but I think people like that he's honest.
He's a showman in a way, right? So he's a funny guy, don't get me wrong, or some of his jokes a little on the edge, certainly, but everybody enjoys a good laugh.
His bizarre and erratic behaviour.
So play YMCA. Go ahead. Let's go. Nice and loud.
Dancing, not speaking, for 40 minutes on stage.
Is that better? Is that better?
Or crass gestures when the mic wouldn't work. All formed part of the transfixing Trump show. And it worked. He performed his way right back into the White House. Sarah Smith, BBC News, West Palm Beach.
Well, in the run-up to polling day, all the focus was on the 7 key swing states. Now, this is where the election would be decided. With speculation, it would be close. It might even take days to declare a winner. In fact, it was just a few hours before Georgia and North Carolina declared for Donald Trump, followed by Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And in the last few minutes, we've just heard that Michigan has been called for Mr. Trump, and he's leading in Arizona and Nevada too. The biggest prize was Pennsylvania, worth 19 electoral college votes, won by Joe Biden handily 4 years ago. From there, Tom Bateman looks at what might have persuaded many voters to switch to Donald Trump this time round.
At the steps where Kamala Harris made her final pitch, now they're packing up, defeated, and she's going home.
I voted for Kamala too as well, but I already figured Trump was going to win just due to the campaigns. I just felt like her campaigns wasn't strong enough, and also just being as though they don't want to see a woman leading in the office.
Trump outperformed Harris, particularly among men. Peter walks Coco here every day and struggled, he says, as inflation surged under Joe Biden.
Yeah, I like being able to afford groceries. I like being able to pay for gas. I like that Trump wants to, do away with income tax and replace it with tariffs and make us a much better country again.
These steps are famous from the movie Rocky. A plucky underdog takes on a heavyweight champion. But Harris just couldn't break through in this critical swing state, which her side only scraped a win 4 years ago.
Kamala Harris was trying to outperform Joe Biden in this city and therefore across the state. But in the end, Donald Trump ate into those margins, even taking voters from Harris here in Philadelphia.
But mostly concerned just right in this moment for women, for my LGBT community, for my trans friends. I'm very concerned about the future for us,
I feel like waking up, especially as a woman, my husband is distraught, but I was like, can we put it aside for a minute because I need that love and support.
When people said during the campaign that Trump was going to be a danger to democracy, what did you think?
He's a good leader, but he's not a dictator. He's not a Nazi or a communist or anything. That's just, it was uncalled political rhetoric, if you ask me.
In the end, Donald Trump built on his base in the rural Rust Belt and even advanced in Democrat voting Philadelphia. And his fans are now hailing a knockout blow. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Pennsylvania.
Well, in January, the ceremony for Donald Trump's inauguration as president will take place here in Washington. Let's talk to Sarah Smith live in Florida now. Sarah, one wonders what happens now.
Yes, well, Donald Trump made many radical and controversial proposals through the course of this campaign, and now he has the mandate to be as bold as he likes. And so that means swift, drastic action to close the US southern border and try to end illegal immigration. And he's also said that he plans to try to deport up to 15 million undocumented migrants living in the US. That could even mean building camps to detain people whilst he tries to deport them. Now, people weren't always sure exactly how seriously to take some of the things that Donald Trump said at his campaign rallies, but there were proposals about which he was absolutely clear. That includes imposing 20% import tariffs on goods coming into the US, even more on some, and his plan to use the justice system to target his political opponents, people he considers to be his enemies. He wants to investigate, prosecute, possibly even imprison some of them. He's even talked about using the military to go after the people he describes as the enemy within. In his first term, he was somewhat constrained by the aides and officials around him. This time, he will make sure that he is surrounded by loyal, like-minded staff who won't try to stop him. And thanks to a recent Supreme Court ruling, he knows that he has almost total immunity from prosecution for anything he does as president. And he believes he has a strong mandate from the American voters to implement the things he promised he would do, and one assumes now intends to.
All right. Sarah, thank you. Sarah Smith, our North America editor there in West Palm Beach, Florida. As the counting went on overnight in those all-important swing states, it became clear to Kamala Harris's supporters that any chance of victory was slipping away. Many were tearful, having gathered for a victory rally, but leaving heartbroken. Despite high-profile celebrity endorsements and a formidable ground operation and lots of money to try to get their voters to the polls, the Harris campaign failed. She's due to give a concession speech in a few hours' time here in Washington, D.C., a heavily Democrat area, of course, where she won more than 90% of the vote. The rest of America had a very different idea. As America wakes up to Donald Trump's victory, the dream many had of a first woman president is over. A group of early morning joggers hit the road, one Democrat among them, shocked by the election result.
It's really scary to know what's going to happen next, and I think just feeling a lot of uncertainty and nervousness about the future.
And at the venue for Kamala Harris's overnight election watch party, there's a mournful silence. The morning after, the balloons are still up. The barriers are also in place because there should have been a victory party here at her old university for Kamala Harris. Now it's awake. I can see you have been crying.
I have been crying. I definitely have been crying.
We came across student Anna Wiggins, distraught and bewildered. How awful was it last night?
I think I found out about the results around like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was so crushed because letting Trump win is a vote for racism. It's a vote against women. I'm so scared. I'm terrified for this country. And I'm so hurt that America let this happen in the first place.
So why did America reject Kamala Harris?
Welcome to the Eras Tour.
Her endorsements were big and famous.
I'm supporting Kamala Harris for president.
Every single vote. Every one is going to matter.
But did any of this speak to the concerns of ordinary Americans? From rural areas to urban centers, from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, millions felt their country was on the wrong track. Donald Trump felt their pain.
My message to Americans tonight is simple. We do not have to live this way. We don't. We don't. And we won't. We won't. We do not have to settle for weakness, incompetence, decline, and decay.
I'm sad, and we are all sad, but at the end of the day, we don't have time for solace. You got to get up and go work.
One Democratic strategist admits Republicans asked the questions Kamala Harris didn't.
So he asked people 3 things. How do you feel about immigration? How do you feel about crime? And are you better off? Is the economy better? And so people said no to those things. I don't think that's true.
But elections are about instincts and feelings as well.
I agree. But look, at the end of the day, at some point we have to look at some realities.
The first decision I made to nominate as nominee in 2020 was selecting her as my vice president.
One reality is that Kamala Harris was fatally tied to an unpopular president. And during the campaign, she failed to make a decisive break from her boss.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
She seemed tin-eared, not only turning off moderate Republicans, but also Democrats too, black men, Latinos, younger voters.
There's a problem with the messaging. Some of it has to do with religion, some of it has to do with tradition, some of it has to do with masculinity. And so I don't know what we do yet, but we've got to figure out a way to move forward. But I don't think this is a time for the party to capitulate and move back from the progress that we want to push forward.
That post-mortem on the structural realignment of the political map we've all just witnessed begins now, as Donald Trump prepares for a second term, given a second chance. Well, many world leaders have congratulated Donald Trump on his victory. Ukraine's President Zelensky said he hoped the new president's approach could bring peace in his country a little bit closer, while Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu praised the win as a new beginning. European leaders were also quick to offer their congratulations, although there is some private concern about what the victory could mean for European security and the world economy. Well, Jeremy Bowen, our international editor, has this assessment.
During his first term, Donald Trump often alarmed his allies with sometimes impulsive and naive overtures towards the world's strongmen, here with Kim Jong-un, the ruler of North Korea.
And then we fell in love. Okay? No, really. He wrote me beautiful letters.
Trump always wants to be the biggest man in the room, but he'll face more complicated challenges now than the first time round, since the summit in Finland in 2018, when he met Russia's President Putin. America's authoritarian rivals are now forming an axis. Putin couldn't fight the war in Ukraine without help from North Korea and China. Trump might find the plan he pushed repeatedly during his presidential campaign this year to end the war simply doesn't work.
I will have that war finished and done and settled before I get to the White House. As president-elect, I will get that done.
Ukraine's President Zelensky couldn't fight on against Russia without American military aid. Zelensky will fear Joe Biden's arms supplies might be replaced with Trump's arm twisting to concede land to Russia to make a deal. On social media, Zelensky offered congratulations and appealed to Trump's self-image as a strong leader. For Ukraine, peace through strength is another way of asking for more weapons. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has also taught America's Western European allies a hard lesson, that without U.S. military power, they would struggle to defend themselves. Trump will redouble the demands of his first term, that the Europeans need to spend more on defense. If not, he might threaten once again to take the U.S. out of NATO. From the Middle East came congratulations from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on what he called history's greatest comeback. Israel needed a lot of American help to defend itself against Iranian missiles. The Israelis couldn't fight on multiple fronts without U.S. military and diplomatic support. President Biden would not use that leverage to insist on a ceasefire. Middle East watchers here in Washington believe he might want to impose an American agenda on Israel's.
The Middle East is also on the edge of drawing America into another major war in the Middle East. And I don't think Donald Trump, based on his record, wants that. So it's not that he cares about Palestinians or cares about Lebanon or cares about Iran. He may very well not agree with the theory of the case that Bibi Netanyahu has, which is to expand the war and, if need be, draw the United States into it.
China will be a major challenge in the second Trump term. Since his state visit to President Xi Jinping in Beijing in 2017, China has made bigger strides towards rivaling America as the world's strongest power. On the eve of the election, Trump repeated his plan to put a big tax on imports from China and others, also known as a trade war.
And I'm doing the same thing with China. We're going to tariff the hell out of them.
Longer term, a real war is another risk, with growing military tension between China and Taiwan. Before he leaves office, Donald Trump might have to decide whether America will fight to defend an island 7,000 miles away across the Pacific that's only 100 miles from the Chinese mainland. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Washington.
The global view there from Jeremy. What about the view from the UK? Well, Sir Keir Starmer also congratulated Donald Trump on his win and said he would work with the president-elect to ensure the special relationship between the two countries continued. In the Commons, the new leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, asked the Prime Minister to apologise for previous comments by his Foreign Secretary describing Donald Trump as a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. Here's Chris Mason.
Having access to the White House, being heard in Washington, a long-standing must-have of UK foreign policy. This, a gathering in July, President Biden inviting the Prime Minister and others for dinner.
Can I, first of all, welcome the Leader of the Opposition?
Here at Westminster, it was also a day for promotions, Kemi Badenoch making her Commons debut as Conservative leader, and the Prime Minister reacting to this morning's news.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by congratulating President-elect Trump on his historic election victory. As the closest of allies, the UK and US will continue to work together.
And Kemi Badenoch's sentiments were similar.
So I would like to start by congratulating President-elect Trump on his impressive victory this morning.
But hang on, she and others have pointed out. Compare and contrast the Foreign Secretary's gushing congratulations to Donald Trump today, we look forward to working with you in the years ahead, with what he said in 2017, saying he'd protest on the streets if the president turned up, and saying he was a racist Nazi sympathiser. And that's not all.
And I quote, Trump is not only a woman-hating neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order.
The Foreign Secretary and I did meet President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago for dinner for about a couple of hours, and we discussed a number of issues of global significance. It was a very constructive exercise.
Sir Ed Davey.
The Liberal Democrat leader claimed today was a dark, dark day for people around the world.
President-elect Trump praised Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and I quote, he called it genius. He also said he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want to NATO allies.
Nigel Farage's view was rather different. It was of Florida. He was at Donald Trump's victory party. Speaking to GB News, where he works as a presenter, he had this offer for the Prime Minister.
Clearly, what the Labour government need to do is to roll out the red carpet. There is a fantastic opportunity ahead of us. And all I can say, as somebody who was a personal friend of his, has backed him all the way through his career, you know, if I can help broker a little bit of peace between the two, I'd be very happy to help.
Well, welcome.
The next time the Prime Minister is here in the Oval Office of the White House, it'll be Donald Trump extending his hand. Brash controversy and wild unpredictability. The new normal again. Now, talking to MPs today, some are pleased with the election of Donald Trump. Most, though, are rather fruity in their descriptions of the president-elect, ranging from mild concern to, frankly, outright horror. Others reflect on what his victory says about the failure of conventional politicians to talk to and understand millions and millions of people who were drawn to Mr. Trump. Now, what we can expect, and Westminster is preparing for, is plenty of noise and turbulence. That is kind of the Donald Trump way, isn't it? But then, crucially, there is policy. There is the question of Ukraine that Jeremy was talking about. There is climate change. And then there is trade. What about this suggestion from Donald Trump of the imposition of massive tariffs, import taxes? And what might that mean for Sir Keir Starmer's desire to really turbocharge economic growth? So many implications to ponder tonight.
Indeed, Chris, thank you for that. Chris Mason there, our political editor, live at Westminster. On the financial markets, the dollar surged against the pound and euro on the back of Donald Trump's victory, as investors bet on lower taxes and higher interest rates. But Borrowing levels for the US government also rose, and there are concerns, as we've been hearing, about Mr. Trump possibly sparking a global trade war. Faisal Islam is in central London for us. Faisal, interesting times potentially for the global financial outlook.
Clive, it's a huge moment for the world economy. Immediately, we have seen this reaction in world markets. The value of the dollar in world markets was up sharply. US stock markets were up, one to an all-time high, too. And within that, rather intriguingly, the value of the electric car maker Tesla went up by 110 billion, and its part owner Elon Musk, a key supporter of Donald Trump, his stake went up by $14 billion. And this is part of, if you like, the Trump trader relief rally, because we're no longer in limbo. But now we have the focus on what Trump will actually do. And first, those big tax cuts against an economy where borrowing is already ballooning is likely to increase that debt by several trillion. And you're seeing a reaction in the markets for US government debt, the effective interest cost of borrowing going up. Also a reflection that potentially inflation will be higher and interest rates will be higher. And these markets can seep into other markets like here in the UK, where there could be an impact in terms of lower than expected fall in interest rates. But then there is that big thing on trade. Will Donald Trump essentially lead to a global trade war? He seemed to suggest that by the imposition of not just a tariff against enemies in certain sectors, but against kind of everybody everywhere in all sectors, worth $500 billion potentially, not just against China, but also against Europe. So there is a risk, not a certainty, of a transatlantic trade war. And that does raise questions about what the United Kingdom would do, whether to gang up with the Europeans to try and persuade Trump not to do this, maybe go with the Americans, maybe try and be peacemaker, maybe try and sit this out and risk being caught in the crossfire. There could be an impact on inflation and growth in the UK and around the world.
All right, we'll see what happens. Faisal, thank you. Faisal Islam, our economics editor there. We're going to move away from the US election and take a look at some of the other stories in the pipeline now. And the Prince of Wales has told the BBC that his wife is doing really well following her cancer diagnosis earlier this year. Prince William was speaking in Cape Town ahead of tonight's Earthshot Prize ceremony. The competition is an annual award giving £1 million to the 5 most environmentally innovative projects.
The Earthshot encompasses urgent optimism. That's what we're here for. And as I think you'll see tonight, the amount of youth from Africa who will be in here, they'll be letting you know and letting everyone know that it matters to them. And without them, you know, the future is looking pretty bleak.
Our audiences would want to know, how is the princess?
She's doing really well, thanks, and hopefully she's watching tonight and sort of cheering me on. But no, she's been amazing this whole year, and I know she'll be really keen to see it tonight be a success.
3 men have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter and the production of cannabis after an explosion at a house in Newcastle last month. A man and a 7-year-old boy were killed in the explosion. 2 men in their 30s and another in his 50s remain in custody. A GP who tried to murder his mother's partner in a row over inheritance has been sentenced to more than 31 years in prison. Dr. Thomas Kwan, who worked in Sunderland, disguised himself as a community nurse to inject his victim with a fake COVID jab, which was in fact poison. As a result, Mr. O'Hara contracted a life-threatening disease. And the former Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy is to be paid most of the £11 million in wages he missed out on after he was charged with and then acquitted of sexual offences. City stopped paying him between September 2021 and the end of his contract in June 2023. The judge at an employment tribunal said City were entitled to withhold pay for a period of about 5 months when he was held in custody. Okay, let's go back now to our top story and Donald Trump's victory. Let's talk to Sarah Smith, our North America editor again, who's in Florida. Sarah, it was a resounding victory. It wasn't even close. What can we take away from that?
Well, it might be tempting at first look to think that American voters responded to some of Donald Trump's racist and sexist language, some of the violent rhetoric he used during the campaign, some of his more extreme ideas. But actually, talking to voters all the way through this campaign, what I found was that a lot of people were supporting him. Most people who supported him, in fact, were doing so despite all of that outlandish behaviour, not because of it. They were just very simply not happy with the economy, not happy with the direction the country was going in. He told them that he would fix it, and they believed him. The Harris and Biden administration also had really not done enough to tackle what were record levels of illegal immigration. And that was something that was very concerning to a huge number of American voters. They didn't see anything being done about it, and they really trusted Donald Trump to grapple with that issue as well. Now, the Democrats, of course, throughout this campaign were warning that he would try to rule as an autocrat and that he would undermine American democracy. Well, those warnings sounded rather hollow to people who simply said that rising prices under their government meant that they were struggling to make ends meet. And you had Kamala Harris campaigning with the slogan saying, "We won't go back." Now, of course, she was talking about women's rights and civil rights, but actually a lot of voters listened to that and said, you know what, we do want to go back. We want to go back 4 years to when Donald Trump was in the White House and we felt considerably better off. They know him. They know what he is like in government, and they have chosen to go back to that for pretty simple kitchen table reasons.
Yeah, it's all about the economy, stupid. I mean, the country is clearly divided. We've all seen that, no question about it. But one wonders, can Donald Trump bridge the divide between communities, between those on either side of the political divide?
Well, and one wonders if Donald Trump wants to, because he has this clear, secure victory. He has enough of the country behind him to back him in what he wants to do. Is he interested in reaching out to people who fundamentally disagree with his ideas, with his worldview, and with his way of doing things? Because it's really interesting to think about, isn't it? I mean, he has won so many of these states, a really resounding victory in the Electoral College. But if you look at all of those key swing states we were talking about for so long, very small margins of victory there. So it looks like he's won big, but this is still a deeply, deeply divided nation.
Indeed it is. Sarah, many, many thanks to you. Sarah Smith, our North America editor there. And there's more analysis on the election on BBC Americast, available on BBC Sounds. And it's available whenever you want it too. Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Louise Leah. Hi, Louise.
Hi there, Clive. Quite a misty, murky day for many of us today, but for some, it was mild and there were some brief glimpses of sunshine. In fact, in the far northwest, in Northern Ireland, parts of northwest Scotland, we had temperatures 17 or 18 degrees as a maximum, above the average for the time of year, and we're going to keep that warmth through the night tonight. Take a look at this. Out to the west, temperatures holding up between 11 and 13 degrees. That 13 in Stornoway, well, the average in November is 3 degrees, so incredibly mild at night to come. We're still under the influence of high pressure, but a little bit more of a breeze driving in this mild air from the south. But the stronger wind tomorrow means that hopefully western areas might see a little more in the way of sunshine. So some breaks in the cloud across parts of North Wales and certainly into the far north of Scotland. Misty, murky start in the southeast. Hopefully that will lift, but to low grey cloud. And once again, those temperatures pretty respectable for this stage in November. We're looking at highs of 15, possibly 16 degrees in the far northwest once again. Into Friday, it's almost a repeat performance. Again, we will start off with cloudy skies, freshening breeze breaking up the cloud out to the west and once again into northern Scotland, and those temperatures a similar story. But there is the potential for a subtle change as we move into the weekend. A weather front will start to push in from the Atlantic during Saturday and into Sunday. It potentially could bring a little bit of showery rain on Sunday. Hopefully behind it, it will help break that cloud up and we'll see some sunshine on Monday onwards. But into the weekend, don't expect that much in the way of change to the story or the feel of the weather. Back to you.
All right, Louise. Thank you, Louise Leah there. That's it from us here in a very sunny Washington on a momentous day, of course, for American politics. After Donald Trump defied his critics and comfortably secured a second term as the American president. Despite polling suggesting this would be one of the closest ever U.S. elections, in the end, he won comfortably, beating Kamala Harris, and will take office as the 47th president in January. I'll be back at 10, but we'll leave you now with some of the key images of the election campaign. Have a very good evening.
Polls are now closed across all 50 states. Former President Donald Trump and Republicans are having a very good night.
People are getting more and more anxious.
Well, it's the converse here because people are getting increasingly excited.
Fight! Fight! Fight!
This is a pretty bleak picture for the Democrats.
They haven't conceded defeat, but they all but have in the way that they've closed down this event tonight.
Breaking news overnight, CBS News can project that Donald Trump has been elected 47th President of the United States.
It is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?